This is Part 3 Episode 121. 5,000 meters. Hui Yuhao was riding the White Tiger Duke, and finally managed to reach an altitude of 5,000 meters. He watched the soul tool that measured their altitude as he sensed the White Tiger Duke's surging soul power, filled with complex feelings. This was his father's back, wide and strong, and giving him a sense of security. Dai Hao, who had transformed into a white tiger, was still rising quickly. In just a few seconds, he managed to climb a few more 100 meters. The night sky was getting quieter. Right now, the lights that came from below them also became unclear. Everything around them was pitch black and cold. However, Hui Yuhao wasn't terrified at all. He didn't know why. It might have been because of Dai Hao, or for some other reason. Dim white light was shining from the White Tiger Duke's fur. The extremely low surrounding temperature also spurred Hui Yuhao to unleash his Ice Empress armor to protect himself from being frozen. The White Tiger Duke's aura was at its limit. Even though he didn't unleash it toward Hui Yuhao still felt slightly petrified. However, he felt as if some kind of energy in his body was being summoned just as he was petrified. This feeling was very weird. Hui Yuhao quickly found the source of this energy, blood. More accurately speaking, it was his lineage. It was the lineage that he had inherited from his father. When the White Tiger Duke unleashed his soul power to his full ability, the power of his own lineage rose along with his martial soul. Hui Yuhao shared the same blood as him, while his cultivation was also weaker than the White Tiger Duke's. Naturally, he was drawn by the White Tiger Duke's lineage. Blood is thicker than water. Given that they were directly related, the connection of their lineage was undoubtedly very close. Under such a situation, Hui Yuhao felt even closer to the White Tiger Duke. The circulation of the White Tiger Duke's blood was increasing quickly. Also, Hui Yuhao was astonished to realize that the White Tiger Duke's aura seemed to have some kind of weird power that was fusing into his body in streaks. His circulation was increasing quickly as this power fused into his body. As the weird power spread over him, Hui Yuhao's real eyes couldn't help but appear. To prevent the White Tiger Duke from finding out, he had no choice but to use his imitation to conceal them. Yuhao, the White Tiger Duke's voice sounded. Yes? Hui Yuhao was immediately jolted to his senses. I can send you to an altitude of almost 6,000 meters. If I continue to rise further, I'm afraid that you'll drain too much of your soul power when you glide over the mountains. My limit is around 5,800 to 6,000 meters. Do you think you need to reach a greater height? Hui Yuhao said, there's no need to. 5,500 meters is sufficient. All right then, prepare yourself. The White Tiger Duke's body started to shine even brighter. The glaring white lights engulfed Hui Yuhao's body and isolated him from the cold. He turned into a ball of intense white light that rose further into the sky. In an instant, they rose several hundred more meters. Hui Yuhao's eyes brightened, and his soul power surged, completely transforming into ultimate ice. Given his immense spiritual power, he could sense more than 1,000 meters around him, even without his spirit eyes. He knew that the White Tiger's sudden outburst meant that the mission was about to begin. Indeed, the white light slowly retracted after a moment. The White Tiger's momentum seemed to have stopped. The huge White Tiger turned into a ball of light that surrounded Hui Yuhao. As the white light surged, the White Tiger disappeared, and the White Tiger Duke had already returned to Hui Yuhao's back. He grabbed Hui Yuhao's waist and shouted, Yuhao, you must be careful and mind your safety. Don't be reckless. I'm going to send you in. Get ready. All right. Hui Yuhao simply acknowledged his words. His Ice Empress armor strengthened slightly, and a stalk of shiny and smooth star anise mysterious ice grass appeared on his shoulder. It released an icy blue aura around Hui Yuhao. The White Tiger Duke shouted, and the veins on his burly arms bulged. His explosive strength was instantly unleashed. He exerted strength from his waist and flung Hui Yuhao out. Hui Yuhao rolled up naturally in the air, and shot forward more than a few hundred meters like a grenade. As he shot forward, he slowly opened up his body like a big bird. A butterfly-shaped flying-type soul tool opened up behind his back and stabilized his body in the air. The white tiger Duke drifted in mid-air. After seeing that Hu Yuhao had stabilized his body and flown off into the distance, he heaved a sigh of relief. Before he personally witnessed it, he couldn't believe that Hu Yuhao could survive at such a high altitude even though he was only just a soul sage. His ultimate ice was indeed extraordinary. At this moment, the white tiger Duke focused his gaze. He was stunned to discover that Hu Yuhao, who was within his field of view just earlier, had already disappeared. He had disappeared without a trace. Even with his acute senses as a title Doluor, he wasn't able to locate him. This kid. His indeed unparalleled in his surveillance abilities. How did he manage to do this? Even if he possesses twin martial souls, shouldn't he be using his ultimate ice martial soul? How is he able to use his spiritual type martial soul at the same time? It was normal for the white tiger Duke to be unable to comprehend this. He was still very unfamiliar with the newly discovered spirit system. Although Hu Yuhao was gifted, he couldn't use two martial souls at the same. However, it was different if he had a spirit. More accurately speaking, the Ice Empress was his martial soul. She wasn't considered his spirit. However, the star Anise Mysterious Ice Grass was a pure spirit. When the star Anise Mysterious Ice Grass appeared on Hu Yuhao's shoulder, it immediately had a protective effect on him. The extremely low temperature in the sky couldn't affect the ice grass, which favored low temperatures. In the thin air, there was only one element that was in abundance: ice. The ice grass tapped into this power after it appeared to create a layer of icy air around Hu Yuhao that helped to protect him. Hu Yuhao then changed his martial soul to his spirit eyes and unleashed them, melting into the night sky. The powerful effects of a spirit were immaculately demonstrated on Hu Yuhao, who had twin martial souls. He unleashed his butterfly wings, but Hu Yuhao didn't increase his speed to the maximum. After changing to his spirit eyes, the thin air continued to affect him, but not too badly. As for the external cold, he wasn't bothered at all. After he unleashed his spiritual power, he started to survey the lands below him. He suddenly realized that he enjoyed the feeling of this quiet night sky. Up here, no biological organism could survive for long. It was rare for any living organism to even attempt to reach such an altitude. He felt as if he were the only person in the world. Although it was lonely, there was still an exhilarating feeling of freedom. Up here, the restraints of the world didn't seem to be a problem anymore. His mood gradually entered an ethereal state. His soul power slowed down through a very special method, and his spiritual and soul power fused together perfectly. Right now, Hu Yuhao seemed to have entered an ascended state. It was like his first time in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, but it also felt like his first time looking at the boundless sea of clouds when he first climbed Clear Sky Peak. His body fused with nature, and a layer of dim golden light shone about him. The golden light was clear, as if he had become a star. It seemed like Hu Yuhao had become a part of the sky right now. The summoning feeling that he had once sensed in the Spirit Pagoda appeared once again. Perhaps it was because he was high up in the sky, but this summoning feeling was even clearer this time. Hu Yuhao suddenly felt that his entire world had turned golden. The pitch-black night sky was no longer dark. It was as if some special power of longing was about to descend from the sky onto his body. At this moment, a strong dark aura spread from his chest. A strong power of darkness spread, and a layer of thin scales appeared once again. The rise of this darkness jolted Hu Yuhao to his senses. He furrowed his brow and quickly exited his exalted state. Everything around him was still as dark as ever. There was no gold around him at all. A sarcastic smile appeared on Hu Yuhao's lips. Di Qian, it's you again. The great star Doe Forest. The clear lake of life suddenly surged. A ball of intense black light shot into the sky. A terrifying aura was immediately released and diffused into the air. Even the powerful soul beasts that lived in the slaughtering grounds were all shocked when they sensed this aura, immediately throwing themselves onto the ground like astonished little cats. The black light gradually retracted. Di Qian slowly appeared in mid-air. He had already turned pale, and his fists were clenched. His entire body was filled with a dangerous aura. Second time. This is already the second time. Why? Why is this so? I've been pursuing it for 800,000 years, but I've not obtained it. But it's already appeared twice on his body, summoning him. Why is this so unfair? Is it just because I'm a soul beast and he's a human? Low-pitched roars echoed in the great Star Do forest. However, no one could answer Di Qian's question. Di Qian gradually calmed down. However, his expression was still as gloomy as ever. No matter what, I won't let you complete it. As long as my reverse scale is in you, you can only remain in this world and protect the fortune of the great Star Do forest. After you die, I'll use some methods to make you transfer the power of destiny to a soul beast, and further the fortune of the great Star Do forest. Di Qian looked a little hesitant as he muttered to himself. If not for the fact that he couldn't use brute force to make destiny submit to him, he would have killed Hu Yuhao long ago. However, the power of destiny could only be transferred willingly, it couldn't be taken by force. No matter how strong Di Qian was, he couldn't challenge the laws of the world. He could only wait while protecting Hu Yuhao. After snapping out of his contemplative state, Hu Yuhao looked very calm once more. This wasn't Di Qian's first time hindering him. However, he had also used his actions to prove to his spirits that searching for that feeling wasn't so difficult. This actually wasn't the second time. More accurately speaking, it was the third time. It was just because he was too invested earlier on, which stopped him from controlling his own sensations. Otherwise, he might not have been discovered by Di Qian this time, either. His gaze suddenly turned sharp. He summoned all his soul power and poured it into his flying-type soul tool. Suddenly, all of his soul tool's ports started to circulate at full speed, thrusting him forward like a streak of flowing light. He charged towards the Mingdo mountain range at lightning-quick speed. Hu Yuhao was still 5,000 meters in the air right now, and finally tapped into his own soul power to fly. It was also now that he finally felt the burden of moving at such a high altitude. He was still using his soul power to propel his soul tool, but he was drained 3 times as quickly as normal. His flying-type soul tool seemed to be affected by the low temperature and thin air and was quickly drained. At the same time, Hu Yuhao had no choice but to use his soul power to change the speed of his blood circulation in order to maintain the necessary functions of his own body. Concurrently, he filtered the thin air and absorbed what he could into his body. These processes drained him even further. Flying at an altitude of 5,000 meters, he was naturally unafraid of being spotted by the Sun-Moon Empire. However, Hu Yuhao clearly understood that even a title Doluo couldn't withstand being at such a high altitude for long. If not for his flying-type soul tool, he couldn't possibly fly here, given his abilities as a soul sage. In less than half a minute, Hu Yuhao's soul power was drained by almost 20%. If he continued flying like this, he couldn't possibly reach the Mingdo mountain range. His butterfly-winged flying-type soul tool's ports stopped working under Hu Yuhao's control. He couldn't sustain this any longer. If he continued to do so, he couldn't possibly complete his mission. After he shut the ports, he continued to maintain his flying speed. However, he was slowly descending as he glided towards the Mingdo mountain range. This had always been his plan. Descending from such a great height was completely in contrast with ascending into the sky. The pressure that he had to bear was naturally dipping, and he didn't need to use his soul power to fly anymore. He was in a much better position now. Hu Yuhao continuously used his spiritual detection to observe everything below him. At the same time, he kept an eye on the detector on his wrist. Above 3,000 meters was a safe height to remain at, a height where he would still remain undetected. This surveillance mission involved a few critical risks. Comparatively speaking, getting closer to the Mingdo mountain range was actually the safest part. This was because Hu Yuhao could remove any soul power undulations by shutting his flying-type soul tool off and using his imitation to conceal himself. With the help of his star anise mysterious ice grass, his body temperature was also regulated to a temperature identical to the air. Unless oscillation detectors were used, there weren't any soul tools that could possibly detect his presence. Oscillation detectors were usually very short range. They couldn't possibly detect anything 3,000 meters up in the sky. On the other hand, there were two different times that would be the most dangerous. The first would be when Hui Yuhao unleashed his spiritual detection and tried to survey the area around the death god. The second period would be when he retreated. During the process of retreating, he would need some thrust, which could only be achieved through unleashing his soul power. His imitation couldn't possibly remove all traces of his soul power undulations, it could only conceal them to the best of his ability. As for the Sun-Moon Empire's soul power detectors, Hui Yuhao wasn't certain whether he would be detectable by them. After all, he hadn't obtained any information about the soul tools that the Sun-Moon Empire had installed in the Mingdo mountain range. As he drew closer and closer, he was also descending through the air. From 5,000 to 4,000 meters, he was able to see lights coming from the ground as the pressure on him lessened. At this moment, the Star Luo Empire started to launch their attack to cover the traces of his surveillance. Balls of light could be seen being unleashed toward the Mingdo mountain range. These balls of lights also helped Hui Yuhao determine the position of the Mingdo mountain range, and more accurately locate his target. Even given Hui Yuhao's abilities as a soul sage and a possessor of twin martial souls, he found it difficult to fly without using a flying-type soul tool, so he was very cautious in the control of his butterfly-winged flying-type soul tool. During the process of gliding, he used the wind currents to maintain his altitude. Finally, the highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range came into his field of view just as the detector on his wrist indicated that he was at an altitude of 3,600 meters. More accurately speaking, the highest peak came within the range of his spiritual detection. This was roughly the distance he had planned for. Hui Yuhao used his spirit eyes to observe his surroundings and made a simple estimation. He was now around 8 to 10 kilometers away from the highest mountain peak of the Mingdo mountain range. 10 kilometers was the upper limit of his unidirectional detection. However, he was high up in the sky, which affected the accuracy of his detection to some degree, and he could only make a conservative estimate. His butterfly wings curved in the air to aid him in gliding with the wind currents. Hui Yuhao controlled his flight and tried his best to drift in mid-air. On his forehead, his eye of destiny slowly opened under the stimulus of his spiritual power. Clear rose gold light flashed slightly, and a huge vertical pupilled eye appeared behind Hui Yuhao. To raise the effectiveness of his spiritual detection, he needed the help of his eye of destiny. Without any hindrance, Hui Yuhao's first and second soul rings lit up at the same time. Under the effect of his imitation, all the light that he released was assimilated into his surroundings. It made him look like a ball of air that could generate soul power and spiritual undulations. His immense spiritual power cut through the sky like an invisible ray of light. It went straight toward the highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range. According to his understanding of the death god, the death god's effective range was roughly 5,000 meters, coincidentally outside the range of Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection. In this case, he wouldn't be in much danger even if he was discovered on his way back. After all, a titled Doluo would still need some time to catch up with Hui Yuhao, given the speed he was capable of. By the time that happened, he would have returned to the territory controlled by the Star Luo Empire, and people would be there to reinforce him. However, Hui Yuhao's expression turned serious after a brief moment. This was because he was stunned to discover that his spiritual detection was blocked off by an invisible barrier when it was only 1,000 meters from the highest peak. After this, his spiritual detection dissipated. The barrier was even shaking slightly. This wasn't some protective barrier created from soul power. It was a real, spiritual barrier. Strong spiritual power. Don't tell me that this was generated from a soul tool. Hui Yuhao was shocked. Although there were soul tools that could enhance one's spiritual power, they were very rare. Furthermore, the extent of the increase was limited. Otherwise, Hui Yuhao would have equipped himself with one. Even though his spiritual power didn't penetrate the barrier earlier, he could still clearly sense that a massive spiritual barrier covered the entire highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range. There weren't any loopholes. This meant that he had to overcome this barrier before he could perform any surveillance. Hui Yuhao couldn't guess who had erected such a powerful and sturdy spiritual barrier. At the very least, a spiritual type soul master with the powers of an 8-ringed soul doluor was needed to mount such a defense. More importantly, the area that it covered was simply too huge. The amount of spiritual power drained to erect such a spiritual barrier had to be incredible. Among all the powerful individuals that Hui Yuhao knew, only the evil-eyed tyrant king was so specialized in spiritual power and possessed such terrifying spiritual strength. However, the Sun Moon Empire couldn't possibly have engaged the evil-eyed tyrant king's help, no matter how influential it was. This was why he deduced that a few spiritual and defensive type soul tools were being used to protect the highest peak of the mountain range. The Sun Moon Empire's knowledge of soul tools has actually reached such a level. No matter how much Hui Yuhao had overestimated them earlier, he couldn't help but be shocked right now. At this moment, he saw a streak of light on the highest peak. It was an object that resembled a spire. Although it was very far away, Hui Yuhao could still see it clearly. That spire-like object came from the top of the mountain peak. After that, it quickly grew upward. Very quickly, it was more than 10 meters high. The top of it flashed with glowing metal. Suddenly, a bright, white halo spread from that spire-like object, projected towards Hui Yuhao. The white halo quickly spread after moving away from the spire-like object. It kept on growing, as if it were a rising tidal wave. What is this? Undoubtedly, it was another soul tool that Hui Yuhao had never seen before. However, just because he had never seen it before didn't mean that it wasn't dangerous. His senses were also very acute. Although the white halo had yet to reach him, he could judge that it wasn't offensive or lethal. However, it contained gentle undulations and a spiritual aura. Spiritual type, oscillation detector. Once-off thing. This isn't good. It's trying to locate my position. After a brief moment of judgment, Hui Yuhao immediately reacted. The white halo covered more and more area as it spread out. At first, it was only a meter wide. However, it instantly grew to more than 100 meters wide, and it continued to expand further. At such a speed, it would be more than 500 meters wide by the time it reached Hui Yuhao. There wasn't any way he could avoid it if it expanded to that width. At this critical moment, Hui Yuhao's decisiveness developed during the ultimate soldier plan played a prominent role. He put his flying type soul tool away without any hesitation and allowed himself to free fall. He might possibly enter the surveillance range of the Sun Moon Empire's surveillance soul tools. However, he wasn't willing to be engulfed by the white halo even if he ran the risk of doing just that. He could sense a lethal threat from that non-lethal, inoffensive white halo. He fell very quickly. The wind around him was extremely strong, but Hui Yuhao's spiritual power kept him focused on the white halo. His quick reaction saved him. That white halo swept past his head, and only slowly dissipated around 10 kilometers from the mountain peak. As it swept past his head, Hui Yuhao immediately confirmed his judgment earlier. He was right. There wasn't any strong aura within that white light. However, it clearly contained some kind of special frequency wave, as well as a light spiritual aura. That was sufficient to determine the position of anyone it ran into. As he fixed his gaze on the mountain peak, Hui Yuhao could subtly see a dim red object flashing slightly before disappearing. Lucky. If his position had been determined, he might have been struck a deadly blow in the next instant. What kind of power does this mountain peak possess? Its defense is actually so strong. My spiritual power only slightly touched the barrier before such a huge reaction was sparked. As he thought to himself, Hui Yuhao summoned his soul power and reduced the momentum of his fall. His imitation was fully unleashed before he slowly opened his butterfly-winged flying-type soul tool. He couldn't open it too quickly, as he was falling too fast. If things went amiss, his flying-type soul tool would be destroyed. As he lowered his head to look at the detector on his wrist, Hui Yuhao cursed to himself. This short period of free fall had caused his altitude to fall from 3,500 meters to 2,500 meters. He was within the range of the Sun Moon Empire's surveillance soul tools now. Even though there were only a few soul tools that could detect him, he would have raised alarm bells by now. Very soon, he was sure to be the focus of all surveillance. What should he do? Every time he was in such a crisis, Hu Yuhao was always stimulated to the best of his potential due to the massive pressure. This time was no exception. He knew that his surveillance mission today would be unlikely to yield too much progress. However, it wasn't a complete failure. At least he had managed to see what was going on at the mountain peak. He had to return now. He managed to halt his free fall, and changed his unidirectional detection to an all-around detection, sensing the changes coming from the Mingdo mountain range. At the same time, he unleashed his spiritual interference while using his imitation. With his spiritual interference, hundreds of square meters of air around him were covered in invisible spiritual undulations. Any form of surveillance that entered this region would certainly be affected. Just like Hu Yuhao had judged, the Sun Moon Empire's reaction was quick. It was just a matter of seconds before several surveillance soul tools were up around Hu Yuhao. These soul's tools employed virtually all the types of surveillance abilities that were available. All that surveillance was focused on Hu Yuhao. They were directly aimed at the region below where the white light had passed earlier. The Sun Moon Empire's experience in terms of reconnaissance through surveillance soul tools impressed Hu Yuhao. They must have concluded that he couldn't possibly fly upward, and could only choose to descend. At such an altitude, he couldn't gain any speed if he tried to fly. Furthermore, they clearly didn't locate him earlier, though they were clearly studying the region he was in right now. He turned around immediately. He couldn't care about being exposed now. He opened his flying type soul tool fully, and turned into a streak of flowing light, before charging toward the military base of the Star Luo Empire. Behind those surveillance soul tools, a dozen figures continued to chase him. Without a doubt, the Sun Moon Empire had sent out their most outstanding soul engineers. Hu Yuhao was very impressed with how the Sun Moon Empire was able to seal off all counter-surveillance on them. His appearance drew great attention from the Sun Moon Empire. Someone powerful from the Sun Moon Empire gave out instructions that Hu Yuhao had to be killed, no matter the price. A spiritual type soul master that could perform long-range surveillance was too important for the Star Luo Empire. However, it was very rare to find such a soul master, so the Sun Moon Empire was determined to kill him. The Sun Moon Empire's judgment of Hu Yuhao was also very accurate. They didn't think that the Star Luo Empire had any soul tools that could perform long-range detection. Since it wasn't a soul tool, it had to be a soul master. When Hu Yuhao unleashed his full strength, his release of soul power reached a maximum immediately. This was something ordinary soul masters couldn't do. Releasing soul power was generally something that required a process. Releasing soul power at such an immense speed might cause damage to the passageways of ordinary soul masters. In fact, it might be so damaging that it was life-threatening. This was especially relevant to soul masters whose soul power was very dominant. But Hu Yuhao didn't have any such problems. His body had gone through a major transformation through his immense spiritual power. His body was much stronger than most other soul masters. It was like he was using the body of a soul doluo, or title doluo, to control the soul power of a soul sage. He would be fine even if he unleashed all his soul power suddenly. The moment he tried to escape with full force, the surveillance soul tools behind had already roughly located his position. Among the figures that chased after him, the one that was leading the pack raised his hand before a ball of blinding golden light shot out. This ball of golden light shot like a shooting star towards Hu Yuhao. After around 100 meters, it suddenly blew apart, and turned into a huge patch of golden rain that engulfed the sky. Domain-type attack. His enemies had realized that Hu Yuhao's position could not be specifically determined. The purpose of this domain-type attack wasn't to kill Hu Yuhao, but to determine his specific position. At the same time, it would also slow his escape. Stationary soul cannon shell. So brutal. Hu Yuhao was also a soul engineer. He could tell how powerful that soul tool was, at least a class 6 stationary soul cannon shell. The Sun Moon Empire was going all out with their efforts to kill him. Snorting coldly, Hu Yuhao maintained his speed. A deep blue projection suddenly appeared behind him. It was the Snow Lady. The Snow Lady sat on Hu Yuhao's shoulder. Her slender figure resembled that of a teenager right now. Her face looked as refreshing, austere, and confident as ever. She raised her right hand as she faced behind him. Suddenly, the cold currents in the air started to gather at an alarming speed. As deep blue lights flashed, large patches of deep blue snowflakes appeared in front of the Snow Lady. These snowflakes weren't very evident in the night sky. However, they soon gathered to form a huge, deep blue whirlpool. The golden rain that chased him was quickly devoured by this whirlpool, and disappeared without a trace. The Snow Lady raised her head and looked at the sky. She pointed her left hand into the distance and a glaring, deep blue glow formed on her hand. Even though it wasn't as cold at an altitude of 2,500 meters, as compared to 5,000 meters, it was still much colder compared to the ground. To the Snow Lady, it was undoubtedly a great opportunity to demonstrate her abilities, and this was not even including the star anise mysterious ice grass yet. The star anise mysterious ice grass was on Hu Yuhao's other shoulder. An icy blue halo spread out before fusing with the Snow Lady, boosting her power. The Snow Lady's help undoubtedly exposed Hu Yuhao's position. However, Hu Yuhao had already managed to escape more than 10 kilometers from the Mingdo mountain range within this short span of time. The Seoul engineers that were pursuing him charged forward at full speed, and drew closer and closer to him. However, it was at this moment that a snowstorm descended from the sky. Snowy dance of ultimate ice. The snowstorm brought an unprecedented chill, and wreaked havoc with the sharp snowflakes. Hu Yuhao's figure was once again concealed by the snowstorm. The Seoul engineers shot out more than 10 streaks of lights, but they weren't able to determine Hu Yuhao's position. They lost their way amid the snowy dance of ultimate ice before he disappeared. When they wanted to attack from all fronts, Hu Yuhao had already disappeared once again, along with his snowy dance of ultimate ice. Air or ground? The Seoul engineers in pursuit were all stuck. At a height of 2,500 meters, Hu Yuhao could either ascend or descend. The speed of surveillance Seoul tools couldn't compare to these outstanding Seoul masters, and were even lagging behind. By the time they managed to close the gap, Hu Yuhao would already have disappeared. One Seoul engineer said hatefully, "This guy can conceal himself. What should we do?" The leading Seoul engineer shook his head and said, "Everything's too hasty. We don't have time to prepare. Let's return first. I'm afraid there will be people from the Star Luo Empire coming very soon." The Seoul engineer who had spoken earlier twisted his lips and said, "They dare to come close to us. Aren't they afraid of being killed by the death god? I don't think they have the guts to do so. It's a pity that this guy has gotten away. The death god Doluo personally instructed us to catch him." This video will end here.